The microphone shrieked, high and metallic, and the sound stabbed straight through the banquet hall like a warning siren. A few people flinched. A few laughed, small, polite laughs, because laughter was what you did when you wanted discomfort to stay harmless. Overhead, warm chandeliers turned every glass of water into a trembling coin of light. The air smelled like lemon-polished wood and shrimp cocktail left too long under heat lamps. I sat 3 tables back from the stage, close enough to hear everything, far enough to pretend I was only there to listen. My name was printed on a cardstock place card, Lila Hart, in black ink that looked too confident for a woman with my history. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My thumb rubbed the edge of the small object in my pocket, a thin plastic disc worn smooth by nervous skin. A white chip. One day at a time, the old mantra said. But tonight, my town wanted the past in bulk. On stage, the banner behind the podium read Trident Family Foundation, Honor Night. The Trident logo was everywhere, on programs, on lapel pins, on the step and repeat wall where couples had posed, smiling as if pride was simple. Every time I saw that symbol, I felt 2 things at once, love and nausea, like the body couldn't decide if it wanted to stand at attention or throw up the truth. The MC tapped the microphone, testing. Thunk! Thunk! The speaker system answered with a low, ugly hum that never fully settled, like the room itself refused to be quiet. Good evening, the MC said brightly. We're grateful to gather for our local heroes, our Navy families, our community. Applause rose, chairs shifted, silverware clinked. I didn't clap too hard. I didn't want anyone's eyes to snag on me. In the front row, my brother's empty chair sat under a small spotlight. A name placard read, Chief Petty Officer, James Hart. They loved a vacant seat in this town. It made grief and glory look organized. It made sacrifice feel like a program you could fold and take home. James was a SEAL. He was also the only reason I had agreed to come. If you don't show up, they'll tell your story for you, he'd said on the phone 2 nights ago, his voice low and steady through static. I'm tired of that. I had stared at the motel room wall and listened to his breathing, heavy with the kind of fatigue that never showed in photos. They'll tell it anyway, I'd replied. Then let them tell it to your face, he'd said. I came because I loved him. I came because I owed him that much. I came even though my stomach had turned the moment I pulled into the parking lot and saw the step and repeat, the Trident logo, the people dressed like Honor was a costume they rented for the night. And I came even though I knew Frank Dwyer would be here. Frank wasn't my father by blood. He was the man my mother married after my dad's funeral, a man who arrived with a firm handshake and a soft voice and a talent for making everything about what people will think. He sat on the foundation board now, wore a Trident pin like he'd earned it, and spoke about sacrifice as if he'd personally paid every bill. He also spoke about me the way you spoke about a cracked plate you kept in the back of a cabinet, with embarrassment and only when necessary. The MC smiled wider. Tonight, we'll hear from community leaders, recognize service, and highlight resilience, especially from families. Resilience. That word always sounded beautiful until someone used it to excuse cruelty. We'll begin, she continued, with a few remarks from our board representative, Frank Dwyer. A ripple moved through the room. Applause, smiles, the familiar comfort of a man who knew how to hold a room without raising his voice. Frank rose from the head table and walked to the podium like the carpet had been rolled out for him personally. His suit was crisp, his hair was perfectly combed. Under the stage lights, his Trident pin flashed like a small blade. He adjusted the microphone with 2 fingers and waited for the room to settle, the way a man waited when he enjoyed being waited for. When he spoke, his voice came through warm and controlled. Friends, he said. Neighbors. 2 words that made people relax. He smiled, then let his gaze travel, slow, deliberate, until it landed where I was sitting. Right on me. My thumb stopped moving on the white chip. My breath stayed even. I didn't look away. Looking away would have been permission. Frank's smile tightened, almost imperceptible, like he'd found a stain on a white tablecloth. Tonight is about honor, he said, and choices. The word choices hit my ribs like a knuckle. He kept his hands on the podium, knuckles pale under stage light. He didn't point at me yet. He didn't need to. He had the whole room leaning forward, waiting for him to define what honor meant. And sometimes, he continued, voice softening into concern, families carry disappointment. A few people chuckled awkwardly, assuming he meant deployments, absences, the normal pain they knew how to praise. Frank's eyes stayed on me. He tilted his head slightly like a pastor about to name a sin. Some people, he said, choose the uniform, then quit. 7 words. His voice didn't sharpen. That was his cruelty. He never needed it to. The room's laughter died. A few heads turned, searching for the subject like dogs smelling blood. Frank's smile returned, smaller. We don't celebrate that. 4 words. My hands remained folded. My jaw stayed loose. I felt the white chip's edge bite my thumb through fabric. A tiny reminder. Don't react. Stay here. Frank continued, still calm. We celebrate the ones who keep their vows. 6 words. The spotlight on my brother's empty chair seemed suddenly brighter, as if the room wanted to prove something about loyalty. Frank's gaze didn't leave me. Finally, he lifted one hand from the podium. Not pointing, just gesturing, as if he were offering the room a concept. And yes, he said, we have one of those stories here tonight. My throat tightened once, then eased. The MC's smile faltered. She glanced toward the head table, confused, as if she hadn't known Frank planned to do this. He didn't ask permission. Frank's hand angled, and his finger became specific. Lila, he said. My name in his mouth sounded like a stain he was identifying. The room turned fully. Faces, eyes, forks paused midair. Someone near me whispered, "That's James's sister." I sat still. Frank's voice stayed gentle, which made it worse. She's family, he said, but she's not a hero. 7 words. Clean, cutting. A hush dropped. Not respectful, not kind. The kind of hush that made you hear the hum under the microphone, the clink of a glass someone's hand was shaking too slightly to control. Frank continued, and his next line was short enough to travel farther than truth. She chose pills over duty. 5 words. The room froze. I didn't blink. I didn't lift my chin. I didn't give him the pleasure of watching me collapse or fight. Because the scandal, the single ugly thing everyone knew my name for, sat in the center of the room now like a spilled drink no one wanted to clean. I had failed a drug test after a back injury. Oxycodone had come in a prescription bottle with my name on it, and then it had come in other ways, hidden and hungry. I had lied to myself first, just until the pain stops, and then I had lied to everyone else. When the Navy found out, they didn't make a speech. They didn't call me evil. They did what the military did with broken things. They documented me, processed me, and sent me out the side door. My town had done the rest. Frank had turned my discharge into a story that made him look like the man who kept the family together. He didn't say addiction, he said weakness. He didn't say injury, he said excuse. And now he was saying it into a microphone. My brother's empty chair stared forward under its spotlight, as if it couldn't turn away either. Frank leaned slightly closer to the mic, lowering his voice as if he were doing me a favor by not shouting. We love her, he said. 2 words and a lie to... But we won't pretend. 3 words. Another lie because pretending was all he did. A woman at my table shifted, uncomfortable. A man across the aisle cleared his throat. Somewhere a glass clinked as someone set it down too hard. Frank's eyes stayed on me, waiting. Waiting for me to stand up and beg for redemption. Waiting for me to snap so he could call it proof. Waiting for me to say anything he could twist into the story he wanted. I gave him nothing. I kept my hands folded. I kept my breathing slow. I kept my thumb pressed to that white chip, feeling its cheap plastic edge like a boundary between past and present. Frank smiled, satisfied with my silence. Tonight, he concluded, is about the ones who didn't fail. 8 words. He said fail like he was enjoying it. Applause began, thin at first, uncertain, then thicker as people remembered they were supposed to clap for a board member with a microphone. The sound was like rain on a tin roof, steady, empty. Frank stepped back from the podium, nodding graciously as if he'd delivered something noble. The MC rushed forward, cheeks flushed. "Thank you, Frank," she chirped, too bright. "Thank you for your honesty." Honesty? I tasted the word like a bitter pill. The MC glanced at the program, then looked out at the room with an eager smile that didn't match the tension. "And now," she said, "we'll move to our first community award, the Resilience Citation." Resilience again. She lifted a sealed envelope, letting the moment stretch. "This year," she continued, "the board chose to honor an individual who quietly helped rebuild families after crisis." My thumb paused on the chip. The MC's eyes skimmed her card, and I saw her expression shift. Confusion, then something like surprise. She cleared her throat. "This person," she read us, "created a peer recovery network for military families, trained local schools in overdose response, and supported veterans returning home with injuries they couldn't explain." A murmur moved through the room. Heads tilted. People whispered names. My heart stayed steady. But my skin went cold because that was my work. I had done it quietly. After rehab, after therapy, after the first support meeting where I couldn't say my name without shaking. I had started small, one meeting in a church basement, folding chairs, stale coffee, a list of phone numbers on a napkin. I had never attached my name to it, not because I didn't want credit, because I didn't want my shame to poison the help. Frank didn't know that. He didn't know anything that didn't reflect well on him. The MC smiled again, still reading. "The board would like to recognize—" She paused, eyes widening slightly as if she'd just realized something the program hadn't warned her about. Then she said the name. Lila Hart. My name landed in the room a second time, but this time it didn't sound like a stain. It sounded like a bell. The applause that had been polite for Frank stopped completely. Silence dropped so hard I heard the microphone hum again, that low, ugly undertone. Frank, halfway back to his seat, froze mid-step. His head turned slowly toward the MC like he'd misheard. My brother's empty chair sat under its spotlight, silent witness to a town that had just been handed two versions of me in the same night. The MC looked toward my table, searching. I remained seated. I didn't smile. I didn't rise yet. Because I could feel it. The room's confusion sharpening into attention, the crowd deciding whether my disgrace was the whole story or only the first chapter. Frank's face tightened, the calm cracking at the corners. And in my pocket, the white chip pressed into my thumb, small and steady, as if it had known this moment was coming. My phone vibrated once against my thigh, one short, urgent buzz. A text from an unknown number lit up my screen. "Don't stand yet? Let them see it. Jay." I kept sitting when the MC said my name because I had learned what happened when you stood too fast in a room that wanted you small. The applause didn't come, not yet. The silence felt thick, almost wet, like the air before a storm. Frank had frozen halfway back to his seat, his trident pin catching the stage light like a sharp little grin. My thumb found the white chip again in my pocket, rubbing its worn edge until the plastic warmed. One day at a time, except shame didn't respect calendars. Shame stayed timeless. That was the wound. My town didn't see a timeline. They saw a label. And Frank made sure it stuck. 8 years earlier, my world had smelled like antiseptic and ocean salt. Hospital corridors near the base, then the damp air outside when I walked out under a sky so bright it felt unfair. A back injury had started it. Not heroic, not cinematic. Just a bad lift, a pop of pain, and the slow grind of days where standing up felt like dragging glass through my spine. The first bottle had my name on it. The second bottle came with a wink from a friend who meant well. The third bottle came with silence. Mine. I told myself I was still disciplined. I told myself I was still the same woman who could fold her uniforms with sharp corners and keep a face still through anything. Pills didn't change people, I thought. They just helped people get through. But then I started planning my days around them the way I used to plan around duty. A different kind of mission. I hid it at first because I could still function, I could still show up. I could still laugh at the right time. I could still call my brother James and sound normal enough that he wouldn't hear the hunger in the pauses. James was already in the teams by then. He lived in a world of brutal standards and quiet loyalty. When he called, his voice always sounded like a shoreline, steady, distant, holding things in. "You okay?" he asked once. 2 words, not casual, a scan. "I'm fine," I lied. 2 words, easy. He didn't press. He rarely did. SEALs knew that pressing could make people disappear. They learned to watch instead. My stepfather watched too, but for different reasons. Frank had arrived in our lives wearing concern like a suit jacket. He moved into my mother's kitchen after Dad's funeral and started helping. He paid bills loudly. He fixed the porch light loudly. He spoke about protecting Helen loudly. And he spoke about my family's image like it was a fragile heirloom. "People talk," he'd say. 2 words that controlled my mother more than any shouting ever could. By the time my injury happened, Frank had already made the trident a decoration in our house. He hung photos of James in uniform where guests could see. He told stories about our boy like he'd raised him. He wore foundation pins to grocery stores. He needed the world to believe our family was made of clean heroism. And I was a smudge. When my drug test came back, no one screamed. The military didn't. Frank didn't either. The military just processed me the way it processed anything that threatened readiness. Paperwork, meetings, faces that didn't soften. My discharge didn't feel like a dramatic fall. It felt like being erased with a stamp. In the admin office, the fluorescent lights buzzed and the air smelled like toner. A petty officer slid a folder across a desk without meeting my eyes. "Sign here," she said. 2 words. I signed. My pen didn't shake. My insides did. When I walked out, my uniform still fit. My posture still held. But my identity felt like it had been peeled off my skin and left behind in a file cabinet. I went home anyway. Not because I thought home would heal me, because I didn't know where else to put myself. Frank met me at the door with my mother behind him, her face pale and tired. I could smell her perfume, soft floral, trying to cover fear. Frank didn't ask what happened. He already knew. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't care. He looked at my duffel bag, then at my face. "Don't bring that in," he said. 4 words, clean cut. My mother's breath caught. "Frank," he held up a hand without looking at her. "Not in this house, 4 words." I stood there on the porch, wind cold against my cheeks, and I realized he wasn't banning the bag. He was banning the story, because if the truth came inside, it would stain him too. I turned my head slightly toward my mother. Her eyes were wet. She didn't step around him. She didn't pull me in, but she whispered my name like she still knew it. "Lila." 1 word. Small love. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded once, like a soldier acknowledging an order. "I'll go," I said. 2 words. Frank's mouth relaxed, satisfied. He'd won without raising his voice. That was his favorite kind of victory. I slept in my car that night, parked behind a grocery store under a buzzing street lamp. The seatbelt buckle dug into my hip. The air smelled like wet asphalt. I held my phone in my hands like it might save me just by existing. James called at dawn. "How bad?" he asked. 2 words, straight to bone. I stared at the windshield fog. "Bad." 1 word. A pause, his breathing steady, then, "Where are you?" 3 words. "In the car," I said. 3 words. Another pause. I heard something shift on his end. Gear, movement, a decision made with no drama. "Go to Harbor House," he said. 3 words. Harbor House was a small rehab program near the coast. It wasn't fancy. It was real. I knew because James's voice didn't recommend fantasies. "I can't," I said. 2 words. Fear disguised as refusal. "Yes," he said. 1 word, final. That was James. No speeches, no pity, just an anchor thrown at my feet. I went. Harbor House smelled like coffee and disinfectant and old carpet. The first support meeting was in a basement room with folding chairs and a box of tissues that looked too full, like people refused to cry where others could see. When it was my turn, I couldn't say my last name. I'm Lila, I whispered. 2 words without the family story. A woman across from me nodded like she understood. Welcome back, she said. 2 words that almost broke me because I didn't feel back. I felt hollow. The early days were brutal in small ways. Sweat at night, hands shaking in the morning, thoughts that tried to bargain. Shame didn't disappear in rehab. It just stopped being the loudest thing in the room. Therapy taught me the line I hated most. You're responsible, my counselor said, voice calm. But you're not irredeemable. 4 words, then 3. A doorway I didn't trust. I wanted punishment because punishment felt familiar. Punishment felt like I could pay a debt and be done. But recovery didn't let you be done. It made you live, one day at a time. That was when the white chip entered my life. Plastic, cheap, and somehow heavier than metals. The day they gave it to me, it smelled like stale coffee and peppermint gum. My palms were sweaty when I took it. I expected lightning. I expected an audience. I got a quiet nod. Keep coming, someone said. 2 words. I put that chip in my pocket and learned how to touch it when I felt myself slipping toward the old story. You are the shame. Months later, I called my mother. Her voice sounded smaller on the phone, like she'd been living in a house where she wasn't allowed to take up space. Lila, she said. 1 word, surprised. I'm sober, I said. 2 words. Silence. Then she whispered, thank God. 2 words and a tremor. I waited for her to ask if I was coming home. She didn't. I waited for her to say she was proud. She didn't. Instead, she said, Frank says we shouldn't talk too much. 7 words, softly delivered. Still a knife. I stared at the wall of my tiny apartment, sunlight sliding through blinds like narrow stripes. Do you want to talk? I asked. 4 words, a pause. I heard her breath hitch. Yes, she whispered. 1 word, the bravest thing she'd said in years. So we talked quietly. Short calls, safe topics at first, weather, recipes, the neighbor's dog. Little bridges that didn't shake the house. Frank didn't like bridges he couldn't control. At a foundation event later that year, I saw a photo online. Frank in a blazer beside the Trident logo, smiling like he'd personally invented loyalty. The caption read, proud to support our SEAL families. Not my stepson, not our family, just the brand. I didn't comment. I didn't call him out. I didn't post my own story. Instead, I went to work. That was my plan, even if I didn't call it one yet. I would build something useful enough that my shame couldn't swallow it. I started with a notebook on my kitchen table. Cheap paper, lines too faint. I wrote down what I wished I'd had. A list of counselors who understood military culture. A hotline number that didn't treat you like a criminal. A meeting that didn't feel like a courtroom. Then I called 3 people I'd met in recovery and asked them to meet me in a church basement on Tuesday nights. No banners, no pins, no podium, just chairs. At first, 5 people came, then 8, then 12. A Marine's wife sat in the back and cried silently, hands clenched as if tears were a betrayal. A retired chief stared at the floor and said, I thought I'd die like this. 7 words, barely audible. I slid a tissue box toward him and said, not tonight. 2 words. We didn't fix anyone. We just showed up. And showing up, repeated, became a kind of pride that didn't need applause. A year later, a school counselor asked if I could train staff on overdose response because a kid's older brother had died in a bathroom. The gym smelled like sweat and floor polish. Teachers sat with coffee cups and tired eyes. I taught them how to use naloxone with hands that didn't shake. Afterward, a teacher pulled me aside and said, you saved my student. 4 words. I answered, we did. 2 words, because community was the only thing that healed shame. James stayed distant because that was his life, but he stayed connected in small ways. A text, a short call, a picture of ocean at dusk. He never gave me a lecture. He never treated my recovery like charity. When I told him about the meetings, he paused and said, good. 1 word, pride, SEAL style. I didn't tell Frank. I didn't tell the foundation. I didn't want the trident stamped on something fragile. But somehow the work traveled anyway. Because people talk. Not the way Frank meant it, gossip, judgment, control. The other way, gratitude. A woman I'd helped once hugged me outside a meeting and said, "You're why my husband's alive." 8 words and my throat burned. I went home and cried alone in my kitchen, the smell of dish soap in the air, the white chip pressed into my palm like a lifeline. I still felt shame. I still felt the old label cling sometimes, especially when I drove past my mother's house and saw Frank's car in the driveway like a parked threat. But shame stopped being my identity. It became a memory I didn't worship. So when the MC read that award description tonight, the peer network, the school training, the overdose kits, I knew the truth. Not the whole town's truth. Mine. And James's text, "Don't stand yet," made sense. Because if I stood too soon, Frank could spin it into theatrics. If I stayed seated, the room would have to sit with the contradiction. The SEAL's shame had been quietly holding other families together while the honor people clapped for speeches. On stage, the MC still looked toward me, waiting. Frank's face had shifted into something tight and panicked. He leaned toward the head table, murmuring to someone, trying to regain control of the moment with whispers. I kept my hands folded. I kept my breathing slow. I kept my thumb on the white chip. And across the room, near my brother's empty chair, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a sealed envelope on the head table already opened, like the decision had been made long before Frank touched a microphone. Frank's hand drifted toward that envelope, then stopped midair, as if paper could suddenly bite. The MC kept smiling like the room hadn't just swallowed a stone. "Lila Hart," she said again, brighter this time, as if volume could solve discomfort. The microphone hummed under her words, and the sound system gave everything a faint metallic edge. My chair felt suddenly too visible. The fabric pressed warm against the backs of my thighs. I could smell lemon polish and buttered rolls and the faint sharpness of white wine on someone's breath nearby. I stayed seated. Not because I couldn't stand, because James had told me not to. Across the room, Frank's head table shifted, whispers like insects under glass. A board member leaned toward him. Frank leaned back with the practiced patience of a man who believed he could still steer the room with a fingertip. The MC's eyes flicked down to her cardigan. She swallowed, then tried the next line, careful. "Please join me on stage," she said. 6 words, polite enough to be harmless. I didn't move. The silence thickened. Forks paused. Someone's chair squeaked as they turned to see whether I was refusing the award or refusing the shame that had come before it. Frank stepped forward before the MC could improvise herself into a mistake. He didn't rush. He never rushed. He walked to the podium like a man returning to his rightful property. His trident pin caught the chandelier light again. Flash, flash, tiny, smug. He leaned toward the MC and murmured something I couldn't hear. Her smile faltered. Her eyes widened with the look of someone realizing a program had hidden landmines. Frank took the microphone without asking. The crowd quieted out of habit. "Small correction," he said warmly. 2 words that meant, "I'm in charge again." He glanced toward me as if checking whether I was still properly seated. "This award," he continued, "was misprinted." 3 words, then 1. A clean lie. A low murmur rippled. People traded looks, confusion, curiosity, that nervous hunger for drama that always arrived at charity dinners like an uninvited guest. The MC blinked. "Frank," he kept smiling. "We can't honor someone who—" He paused, letting the room lean toward him. "Quit." 1 word. He made it sound like a stain you couldn't wash out. My thumb pressed the white chip hard enough to leave a dent in my skin. I felt the cheap plastic bite back, steady and small. Frank's voice softened, almost compassionate. "This foundation supports service." 5 words. Then his mouth tightened. "Not relapse." 2 words, the ugliest kind of efficiency. The room froze again. I could feel eyes on me, not cruel eyes, curious ones. The eyes of people deciding whether they should pity me or judge me. The eyes of people who wanted their heroes clean. Frank didn't stop. He never stopped once he'd found a rhythm. "She can't represent us," he said. 4 words. A board member at the head table nodded faintly as if agreeing saved her from being targeted next. The MC stood beside Frank, hands clasped too tight, cheeks flushed. I stayed seated. Because standing now would look like begging. Standing now would give Frank the frame he wanted. See? She needs us. Frank turned slightly toward the crowd, performing responsibility. "I'm sorry for the confusion," he said. 5 words. He lifted the envelope like it was evidence. "We'll reassign it." 3 words. He began to peel it open farther, fingers sliding under the flap. That was when I saw the corner of the card inside. Heavy stock paper, embossed seal. The ink looked official in a way Frank's words didn't. I realized something cold and clear. Frank hadn't expected the award to be mine. He'd expected the room to clap for someone safer. He was improvising now, and improvisation made control men sloppy. The MC's voice finally came out, shaky but brave. "Frank, it's already the zoo." He cut her off. "Enough." 1 word, his favorite. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. A man in the second row frowned hard. A woman near the wall put her hand over her mouth, eyes narrowing like she recognized cruelty when it wore a smile. Still, no one spoke yet. Because Frank had a microphone. And I, by choice, by discipline, did not. He aimed his next line at the room like he was protecting them from infection. "We honor the faithful," he said. 4 words. Then he looked at me again, and his smile sharpened into a private cut delivered publicly. "Sit tight, Lila," he said. 3 words. Small enough to sound kind, mean enough to sting. I felt the heat rise in my chest, then flatten under control. My therapist's voice came back like a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let shame pick your actions." I didn't stand, I didn't speak. I breathed. James's empty chair sat under its spotlight like a judgment that couldn't speak either. I hated that chair in that moment. Not because it honored him, because it made him a prop for other people's stories. Frank pivoted back to the envelope, ready to announce a new name, any name that wasn't mine. And then I saw something else. At the table near the back, half shadow, close to the exit, a woman sat with both hands wrapped around a water glass like it was an anchor. Her hair was pulled back tight, eyes clear and tired. Tessa. She had been in my Tuesday night meeting for 6 months. She used to shake when she spoke. Now she didn't. On her keychain, clipped to her purse strap, was a small naloxone case. Bright, visible, unashamed. She met my eyes for half a second and gave the smallest nod. Not cheering, not pleading, just, "I'm here." My throat tightened once. Frank's voice rolled on. "We can't confuse our children," he said. 6 words. A thin laugh fluttered in the room, nervous, automatic, and died quickly. Parents didn't like being told they were confused, but they also didn't like conflict at a fundraiser. Frank began to read from the replacement card, and the paper made a soft rasp against his fingers. "This year's resilience citation goes to..." He paused. He frowned. A flicker crossed his face, annoyance, then uncertainty, as if the card wasn't cooperating with his script. He turned it slightly toward the stage light, trying to see better. The MC leaned closer, eyes wide. Frank's lips moved as he read silently. Then his face changed. Not softer, tighter. He lowered the card a fraction, glancing toward the head table as if someone had sabotaged him. He leaned into the microphone again, voice sharpened. "This is wrong," he said. 3 words. The MC whispered. "Frank, it's sealed." He snapped, quieter, meant for her. "Stop?" 1 word. He looked back at the card, and I watched his control struggle against the ink in his hand. Because the card wasn't just an award, it was a record. And records didn't bend easily. He swallowed and tried a different tactic. Less denial, more poison. "This name was submitted," he said, "by mistake." 6 words. A murmur rolled. People looked around, confused. A man near the front whispered, "Who submits these?" Frank didn't answer. He didn't like questions. He lifted his chin, voice now a clean blade. "She doesn't deserve a platform," he said. 6 words. My fingers tightened around the white chip. Platform. That was what he feared, not my sobriety, not my work, my visibility. Because if the town saw me as anything other than disgrace, Frank's role as guardian of honor would shrink. And Frank couldn't survive small. I could. I had learned to. The MC tried again, voice trembling. "Lila, would you?" Frank cut her off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No speech. 2 words. The crowd shifted again. Some faces tightened. Some avoided looking at me like eye contact might make them responsible. I stayed seated. If I stood now, I would be accepting a gift Frank wanted to turn into a weapon. If I refused, he would call it proof of guilt. If I fought for the microphone, he would call it attention-seeking. James's text echoed in my mind, "Don't stand yet." So I did the only thing left that wasn't surrender. I stayed still long enough for the room to feel the ugliness on its own. Frank turned slightly, addressing the head table as if inviting agreement. "We can't reward failure," he said. 4 words. That word, failure, landed on me like a familiar weight. I remembered the discharge paperwork, the blank faces, the way Frank had blocked the door. But I also remembered Tuesday nights. Folding chairs, Tessa's hands finally steady, a Marine widow learning how to breathe again. I pressed the white chip into my palm like a small prayer. One day at a time. One room at a time. Frank raised the envelope again. "We'll honor someone else." 5 words. He tried to pivot, to redirect, to move the night along as if he hadn't just publicly called the SEAL's sister unworthy. That was his move. Injure, then pretend it was normal. But the room didn't feel normal anymore. A woman near the aisle, older, pearls at her throat, shifted forward and opened her mouth, then closed it again, afraid. A man in a blazer frowned and looked toward the stage like he was calculating whether decency had a cost. Tessa at the back table set her water down. The glass clicked softly. Small sound, huge intent. She pushed her chair back. The scrape was quiet, but in the stretched hush of the room, it sounded like thunder. Frank didn't notice yet. He was too busy clinging to the microphone like it could protect him. He cleared his throat to announce a replacement. And behind him, somewhere near the back, someone else stood too. Another chair scraping, another body deciding. I felt the room's weight shift, subtle but real, like a crowd learning how to breathe with its own lungs. Frank lifted the card again, ready to overwrite me. His hand trembled, just slightly, as if the paper had gotten heavier. And I knew the next moment wasn't mine to force. It was the room's to choose. The first clap didn't happen like a celebration. It happened like a correction. Tessa's chair scraped again. Wood on tile, a sound that made every head turn. And then her hands met once, sharp and single, as if she was striking a match in a room full of damp air. Clap, not applause, a signal. Frank paused mid-breath at the podium, still holding the envelope like it was his property. The microphone hummed under his silence, and the chandeliers threw warm light across his face, making his smile look painted on. Tessa didn't look at him. She looked at me. Then she looked at the room. "She saved my husband," Tessa said. 4 words. No tremble. A murmur rolled through the tables, confused, hungry. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice answered, "I think she's in those meetings." Frank's jaw flexed. "Sit," he snapped. 1 word, too loud. Tessa didn't sit. "She didn't ask for credit," Tessa continued. "She asked me to breathe." 9 words. I felt my throat tighten once, then settle. Frank lifted his chin, trying to regain his warm board member tone. "This isn't on program." 5 words, the same old muzzle. A man near the bar stood up slowly, napkin still in his hand like he'd forgotten he was holding it. His tie was loosened, cheeks flushed with the heat of the room. "It should be," he said. 2 words, small, dangerous. The MC's smile had vanished now. Her hands gripped the award card so tight the paper bowed. She glanced at the head table, then at me, then back at Frank like she was watching two versions of Honor fight over the same microphone. Frank tried to move on. We're honoring someone else, too. 4 words. He turned the envelope as if reading a replacement name would erase the last 5 minutes. Tessa raised her voice just enough to cut through the hum. You called her a failure. 5 words. Frank's eyes flicked toward the room, annoyed at being reminded of his own cruelty. She quit. 2 words. The word hit like a slap because it was simple and wrong. A woman at the table beside me, mid-50s, tight bun, a foundation volunteer badge clipped to her blazer, stood up with a small gasp like she'd surprised herself. She didn't quit, the woman said. 3 words. Frank's smile tightened. Ma'am. 1 word. A warning disguised as respect. She was injured, the woman replied. I saw the paperwork. 8 words. My stomach went cold. Paperwork, the thing Frank loved when it served him. Frank leaned closer to the mic, voice soft and dangerous. You don't understand. 3 words. The woman's voice stayed steady. I understand relapse, she said. 3 words. The room shifted again, shoulders angling forward, eyes sharpening. Relapse was a word people pretended they didn't know until it sat at their own dinner table. Frank's trident pin flashed as he moved, restless now. This is a SEAL night. 5 words. He tried to claim the brand again. From the back row, a man in a faded navy blazer stood and said, Then listen to SEAL family. 5 words. A few heads turned. I saw the man's lapel, small trident patch worn at the edges. Not decorative. Earned by proximity, by waiting, by prayers said into pillows at 2 a.m. Frank's lips parted, then closed. He didn't like losing the room to people he couldn't intimidate. Tessa stepped 1 pace into the aisle, shoulders squared. You don't get to use him, she said. 6 words. Frank's eyes narrowed. I'm bored. 2 words. And she's why I'm alive, Tessa said. 6 words. That sentence didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a stake driven into the ground. The room went quieter. Still not kind, but attentive. I felt every eye swing between Frank and me like a pendulum, waiting to see if I would finally stand up and perform redemption. I didn't. I kept my hands folded. My thumb pressed the white chip until the edge hurt, a small pain I could control. 1 day at a time. Frank tried again, voice warm as syrup. We all support recovery. 4 words. He smiled like he'd invented compassion. Then he added, shorter, sharper, his real self slipping out. But we don't reward it. 5 words. A sound came from somewhere near the front. Not a gasp, not laughter. A low, offended wow. The older woman with pearls at her throat, who had almost spoken earlier, finally did. She stood with slow effort, 1 hand on the chair back. My nephew died, she said. 3 words. The room stiffened. Frank's smile twitched. I'm sorry. 2 words. Automatic. Don't, she replied. 1 word, final. She faced the room, not him. He died alone, she continued, because nobody knew what to do. 11 words. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. My skin went cold. I tasted metal. She pointed, not at me, not accusing, just placing truth in the center. Lila came to our church, she said. She taught us naloxone. 9 words. Whispers rose, naloxone, people connecting it to news stories, to kits and glove compartments, to fear they never admitted. Frank's hands tightened on the podium. The microphone gave a faint pop under the pressure of his grip. This is getting inappropriate, he said. 3 words. Someone else stood. A young EMT in a white shirt, foundation lanyard around his neck. He looked like he'd come for a free dinner and got handed a moral test. I got trained, he said. 3 words. Frank snapped his head toward him. Sit. 1 word. Ugly. The EMT didn't sit. She trained us, he continued. School staff, too. 6 words. The MC's eyes widened, and I saw her swallow hard. as if she was realizing she'd been set up to host cruelty on a stage she thought was safe. Frank tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Anyone can do a class. 5 words. The EMT's face tightened. Not everyone shows up weekly. 5 words. A ripple of agreement moved through the room. People nodding, murmuring, remembering a woman who had quietly been doing the unglamorous work of keeping others from dying. Frank's control began to fray. He talked faster now, which meant he said more than he should. She used this family, he blurted. 4 words. That landed wrong. Even the people who had been skeptical stiffened at the pettiness of it. I felt my jaw tighten once, then relax. I didn't speak. Not yet. Across the room, a school principal stood. Gray suit, tired eyes, the smell of coffee clinging to him like armor. I invited her, he said. 3 words. Frank's mouth opened. Closed. The principal kept going. She never mentioned the foundation, he said. She never asked for money. 12 words. The room murmured louder now. Frank's eyes darted to the head table, to board members who were suddenly staring at their napkins like napkins were safer than truth. He leaned into the mic again, voice sharpening. This isn't about her. 5 words. A woman in the second row answered without a mic, voice clear. It's about the lie. 4 words. Minnie turned. The sound system hiccuped. Another brief squeal, and then stabilized, the hum returning. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath. Frank looked around, calculating. He couldn't bully the whole room. He needed to reframe. He lifted the envelope and tapped it against the podium once. Thwap! A hard sound. The board decides, he said. 3 words. Authority. The MC finally found her voice, small but steady. Frank, she said. It already did. 4 words. He turned on her, eyes flashing. No speeches, he snapped. 2 words. The MC's chin lifted a fraction. It's an award, she replied. 3 words. Frank's face went tight. He didn't like resistance from people he considered decorative. And then, from the far side of the hall, a chair scraped loudly, longer, heavier. A man stood who didn't look like a fundraiser man. He wore a simple dark suit. No pin, no smile. His posture was disciplined in a way civilians didn't usually practice unless they'd learned it the hard way. He didn't speak first. He walked. Straight down the center aisle toward the stage, shoes striking tile with a steady, deliberate rhythm that made heads turn like sunflowers toward light. Frank watched him approach, frowning. Who are you? 3 words. The man stopped a few feet from the podium and held up a folded paper. I'm a parent, he said. 3 words. He unfolded the paper slowly. The sound of it, the quiet rasp, carried in the stretched hush. My son overdosed, he said. Last fall. 5 words. A collective inhale moved through the hall. People didn't like the word overdosed at dinner. It ruined the illusion that tragedy was always distant. The man's voice stayed controlled. He lived, he said. 2 words. He looked at me for the first time, eyes clear. Because she answered her phone. 6 words. My throat tightened hard. I stared at the tablecloth to keep my face from moving. I felt the white chip in my palm like a small anchor. Frank's hand gripped the podium edge. This is not proof. 4 words. The man lifted the folded paper. It's a statement, he said. 3 words. He stepped forward and placed it on the stage edge, not giving it to Frank, offering it to the room. Frank leaned down as if to snatch it, then stopped. He saw the letterhead. County MS. Official ink. Official signature. Paper that didn't care about a trident pin. Frank's smile cracked. This is 3 words. He couldn't finish because he couldn't rewrite a document that belonged to someone else. The board member nearest the head table, someone Frank had been whispering to, stood abruptly, chair legs screeching. Frank, she said, voice tight, we voted already. 4 words. Frank spun toward her. You didn't tell me. 4 words. Too personal, too revealing. The board member's face hardened. You were busy, she said. 3 words. The room murmured again. Stronger now, not gossip. Judgment. Frank turned back to the podium, eyes darting, and I watched him realize something terrible. He had been performing honor while the room filled up with witnesses to the truth. Tessa stood tall at the back, hands at her sides, eyes locked forward. The principal stayed standing. The EMT stayed standing. The Pearl woman stayed standing. The parent stayed standing. A crowd slowly assembling its spine. And still, I stayed seated. Because if I stood now, it would become about my courage. I didn't want it to be about my courage. I wanted it to be about the lie dying in public. Frank cleared his throat and tried to pull the night back into his control. We move on, he said. 3 words. His hand went for the microphone switch at the side of the podium. Small black toggle, easy to flip, easy to silence a room. His fingers hovered over it. Then, from somewhere behind the stage, the projector screen flickered. White, then blue, like it was waking up without being asked. The projector screen flared white, bright enough to wash the room's faces flat, then snapped into focus with a grainy image of ocean. Not the decorative ocean from brochures. Real ocean. Wind noise, a horizon that looked like it could cut you. The audio kicked in a half-second late and the speakers hissed before settling. The banquet hall held its breath like it had just been reminded there were worlds beyond chandeliers. Frank's fingers were still hovering over the microphone switch when the video began. He froze, caught between his urge to silence and the fact that the room had already turned its eyes away from him. On the screen, a trident patch filled the frame for a moment, moving with the rhythm of someone walking. Then the camera steadied. My brother's face appeared, sunburned at the edges, eyes tired in the way only distance could do. He wore a plain t-shirt, no dramatic backdrop, no staged flag behind him. The sound of wind pressed against the mic. Hey, James said. 1 word. The room softened around it. His voice didn't boom. It didn't need to. It had the calm that came from knowing what mattered. If you're watching this, he continued, it means someone did something brave enough to let the truth play. 12 words. A quiet challenge. A ripple moved through the tables. A few people shifted uncomfortably like they'd been caught participating in the wrong story. James looked straight into the lens and I felt that old familiar sensation, his focus like an anchor thrown across miles. I can't be there, he said. I'm where I'm supposed to be. 12 words. Simple. No applause needed. Behind the stage, the MC's hands had gone still around her card. Board members stared at the screen like they were afraid to blink. Frank's smile was gone now, replaced by a tightness that didn't belong on a man who loved microphones. James took a breath and went on. This night's about honor, he said. 5 words. Frank's favorite word now taken out of his mouth. And honor isn't just the trident, James added. It's what you do when nobody claps. 14 words. The room fell even quieter, as if the sentence had turned down the lights. I felt my thumb stop rubbing the white chip. For a second, I just held it. James's eyes narrowed slightly, not anger, precision. I heard there's been talk, he said. 5 words, the kind that warned you he already knew. On the head table, Frank's hand tightened on the podium edge. I saw his knuckles blanch. James continued anyway, steady as tide. There's a story some people like, he said. It's neat. It's comfortable. 14 words. The room absorbed it like medicine it didn't want. It says my sister failed, he said. 5 words. A few people flinched. Not because they disagreed, because they remembered how easily they'd nodded along when Frank said it. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. My sister got hurt, he said. She got scared. She made mistakes. 13 words. Human words, not headline words. And then, he said, pausing, letting the pause do its work. She got up. 2 words. The room shifted. He leaned closer to the camera when, tugging at his shirt collar. Do you know what saved me on my worst day? James asked. 10 words. A few heads shook slowly, already afraid of the answer. James didn't look away. It wasn't a speech, he said. It wasn't a pin. 6 words, then 3. It was a phone call from Lila, he said. 7 words. My name landed in the hall with a different weight now, less like a stain, more like a fact. The pearl woman in the aisle pressed her lips together hard. Tessa stood perfectly still, eyes shining but unblinking. Frank tried to move just a half step, as if he could interrupt a video with posture. He couldn't. James continued, voice low and unwavering. I was home on leave once, he said. A teammate's wife found my sister's number. 14 words. She was shaking, James said. She said, I can't do this anymore. 9 words, and the room seemed to hear the tremor inside them. My sister didn't tell her to be strong, James said. She stayed on the line. 13 words. She drove in the rain, he added. She brought naloxone. She brought calm. 12 words, no hero music, just actions. My sister didn't wear a uniform that night, James said. But she served. 12 words, clean and final. I stared at the tablecloth because if I looked up, I might break the discipline that had carried me this far. My chest felt tight, like a door that had been locked was finally being forced open by something gentle. James looked away from the camera for a moment, as if someone off-screen had said something to him. Then he looked back with the same steady gaze. So when you clap for me, he said, I want you to remember something. 14 words. He held up his hand, palm open, empty. My sister is not my shame, he said. 7 were. The room went still like a church. She's the work, he added. 3 words, a sentence so small it hit like a hammer. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. Not because it was dramatic, because it was sacred. He stood. The camera tilted slightly as if someone had set it down lower. James straightened fully in a frame, shoulders back, face calm. I'm asking you, he said, as my community, stand for her. 13 words, not applaud, not forgive, not pity. Stand. The projector fan whined louder for a second, like it was struggling to hold the moment on its shoulders. Then the video ended. The screen went black. No music. No outro. Just the faint hiss of the speakers and the hum under the microphone. An ugly electrical sound that suddenly felt small compared to what had just been said. The banquet hall didn't move right away. People needed a beat to feel their own bodies again. Frank's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked at the MC like she could save him, then at the board, then at the room. He tried to find a lever. He tried to find a script. He had none. Someone stood first, quietly, like they weren't sure they were allowed. It was the school principal, chair legs scraping back, posture stiff with decision. Then the EMT stood beside him. Then the pearl woman. Then the parent with the EMS letter. Then an entire table rose, chairs scraping in a growing chorus that swallowed the banquet hall's polite atmosphere. A collective stand rolled through the room like a wave deciding it was done being held back. And then the cheering came. Not neat, not staged. Real cheers, relief and recognition, and maybe a little shame for how easy it had been to let Frank call cruelty honesty. I stayed seated for one more breath. My hands didn't shake. My throat did. In my pocket, the white chip pressed into my palm like a heartbeat. One day at a time. One truth at a time. Frank looked down at me, eyes sharp, desperate to reclaim dominance with a private cut. His lips moved, but the room was too loud for his poison. The MC stepped back from the podium and reached toward the envelope as if she had been waiting for permission that never should have been needed. Her voice trembled, but she held it. Lila Hart, she said again, this time clear, not performative. Please, join us. I felt a familiar urge. Run, hide, let the moment pass me like weather. Then I remembered what James had texted. Let them see it. I stood. The chair pushed back softly. My knees felt strong. My breath came slow. I stepped into the aisle while the room stayed on its feet. The cheering didn't grow louder when I moved. It steadied, as if the crowd understood this wasn't a victory lap. It was a correction being witnessed. I walked toward the stage, and the chandeliers threw warm light across the white tablecloths, making them look clean in a way life rarely was. I passed Frank's head table. He didn't clap, he didn't move. His face looked carved, control trying to hold shape. I climbed the 2 steps to the stage. The wood under my shoes creaked once, small, human. The MC handed me the envelope with both hands like she was offering something fragile. I didn't open it right away. I looked out at the room, standing bodies, hands clapping, a few people wiping their eyes like they hadn't planned on feeling anything at a fundraiser. I found Tessa in the back, still standing, chin lifted. I found the parent with the letter, hands clasped like prayer. I found the Pearl woman, eyes wet, mouth firm. And for the first time, I let myself look at my brother's empty chair under its spotlight. It wasn't just a prop now, it felt like a witness. I slipped my fingers into my pocket and pulled out the white chip. Small, thin, plastic. I held it up. Not high, not dramatic, just enough for the first rows to see. The cheering softened into a hush that didn't erase me, it held me. I leaned toward the microphone and the speaker hum rose like a warning. I didn't let it intimidate me. I said one line, calm, surgical, so the room could anchor the moment in reality instead of emotion. I didn't need a clean past, just a useful present. 12 words. Silence hit the hall for half a beat. Then applause returned, stronger, steadier, like the crowd had finally found the right reason to clap. Behind me, Frank's hand reached for the edge of the podium, then stopped, as if the truth could bite. The applause kept rolling, not wild anymore, steady, disciplined, like the crowd had decided this wasn't entertainment. It was correction. The stage lights warmed my face until my skin felt too visible. The microphone's hum sat under the clapping like a faint electrical warning. I held the white chip between my fingers, its plastic edge warm now from my palm, and I kept my shoulders relaxed so the room wouldn't mistake my shaking throat for weakness. Behind me, Frank didn't move. He stood near the podium with his hands flat on the wood, jaw tight, eyes hard, like control was a muscle he refused to let go of. His trident pin flashed each time he shifted, a tiny bright lie. The MC cleared her throat softly, and the room quieted on instinct. "We honor resilience," she said, voice steadier now, "and we honor truth." 8 words. Simple. Dangerous. She nodded toward the envelope in my hands. "Please accept this," she added. 3 words. I didn't lift the award high. I didn't wave. I didn't perform gratitude like a speech. I just placed the white chip on top of the envelope, small plastic on embossed paper, so everyone could see what mattered more. A hush fell. Cleaner than silence, heavier than applause. Then the clapping returned, slower, more deliberate. People kept standing. People kept looking at me like they were recalibrating what honor meant when it wasn't packaged. I leaned to the microphone one last time, not to add drama, just to close the moment with reality. "This chip is my medal," I said. 5 words. I stepped back. No more lines. No more air stolen from the room. As the MC guided me off to the side, the stage curtain brushed my arm, rough velvet, warm from lights, and the banquet hall's noise softened into layered conversation. I caught the smell of wine and lemon and perfume, and beneath it, the sharp, clean scent of fear on people who had watched a board member lose control. Backstage wasn't glamorous. It was folding chairs, coiled cables, and a table with bottled water sweating under heat. The air was cooler here, and my skin prickled as the stage warmth fell away. Tessa reached me first. She didn't hug me. She knew better. She just touched my elbow lightly, brief, steady, then let go. "You stayed," she said. 2 words. "So did you," I replied. 3 words. Her eyes shined, but she held them firm. "He can't own it," she whispered. 4 words. I didn't answer with anger. "He never did," I said. 3 words. The parent with the EMS letter hovered near the curtain edge, hands clasped tight like prayer. He didn't ask for attention. He just nodded once, mouth trembling. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. I kept it small. "Your son did," I replied. 3 words. He blinked hard and stepped back as if he didn't trust himself to speak without breaking. The MC slid the card from the envelope and glanced at it like she was seeing the printed truth for the first time. I'm sorry, she said quietly. 2 words. It's okay, I replied. 2 words, not absolution, permission to breathe. Then the air behind us shifted. Frank. He entered the backstage space with the same controlled stride he used at board meetings, as if he believed fluorescent utility lights would still obey him. His smile didn't return. He didn't bother with warmth now. He stopped too close. You made this about you, he said. 5 words. My pulse stayed steady. It was already mine, I said. 4 words. His eyes narrowed. You embarrassed James. 2 words. Cut deep. I didn't rise to it. Don't borrow his name, I said. 4 words. Frank's jaw flexed. He leaned in slightly, voice low and sharp. You're still a quitter. 4 words. The word hit old bruises, but it didn't reopen them. Not tonight. I'm still sober, I said. 3 words. Frank's nostrils flared. Sober isn't service. 3 words. I kept my tone flat. It keeps people alive, I said. 5 words. He looked past me toward the curtain, listening to the crowd outside, still murmuring, still standing in pockets, still processing the correction he didn't authorize. His control needed witnesses. Without them, he shrank. He tried again, softer, crueler. Your mother cried, he said. 3 words. I didn't glance away. Because you hurt her, I replied. 4 words. Frank's smile finally cracked into something ugly. She chose me. 3 words. I answered calmly. She chose quiet, I said. 3 words. That line landed. Not because it was clever, because it was true. Frank's hand twitched toward the envelope in my grip, like he wanted to take the award physically, as if paper could restore power. Give it, he said. 2 words. I didn't move. No, I said. 1 word. For a beat, he looked like he might explode. Then he remembered where he was. Backstage, close quarters, too many people watching now. He lowered his voice into a final blade. You'll lose this town. On 4 words, I didn't blink. I already did, I said. 4 words. His mouth tightened. He stepped back half a pace, and for the first time that night, he looked unsure what to do when threats didn't work. Outside the curtain, the crowd's sound changed. Less chatter, more movement, people beginning to leave, coats being found, chairs scraping, life returning. Frank turned away as if leaving on his terms, then paused with his back to me. You'll crawl back, he said. 3 words. I answered softly with no heat. I'll walk forward, I said. 3 words. Frank's shoulders stiffened. He didn't respond. He pushed through the curtain and disappeared into the banquet hall like a man retreating into the only place he could still pretend. The backstage space exhaled. Tessa's hands shook once, then steadied. The MC pressed her lips together, eyes wet. A stagehand pretended to check cables, just to give everyone something normal to look at. I stepped back into the hall. The chandeliers seemed brighter now, and the smell of lemon polish felt sharper, like the building had been scrubbed with denial for years, and tonight someone finally noticed the chemical sting. People approached me carefully. No swarming, no grabbing. A few quick thank you. A few quiet I didn't know. A few hands pressed to hearts as if they were apologizing without saying it. I nodded. I listened. I didn't collect praise. Then I saw my mother. She stood near the exit, half shadowed by the coat rack, clutching her program with both hands. Her fingers were white at the edges. Her eyes were red, but she held her posture like she was learning a new way to stand. When she met my gaze, her chin trembled. Lila, she whispered. 1 word, my name, not my label. I walked to her. The carpet muffled my steps. The air near the door was cooler, carrying a faint scent of rain from outside. My mother's hands lifted as if to touch my face, then stopped, uncertain, afraid of doing it wrong. I'm sorry, she said. 2 words, I didn't punish her. I didn't soothe her into a lie. I gave her the truth she could carry. You're here, I said. 2 words. Her breath hitched. She nodded quickly, as if that was the permission she'd been waiting for her whole life. She glanced past me toward where Frank had gone, then back to me. She began. I cut it gently. Don't chase him, I said. 3 words. My mother's eyes filled again, but she didn't collapse. She just nodded once, small and brave. In the parking lot, the night air smelled wet and clean. Streetlights reflected off asphalt in thin silver ribbons. Somewhere, a car door slammed. Someone laughed too loudly, then quieted. My mother stood beside me under the glow, her shoulders hunched against cold us. James, she whispered, voice breaking on his name. I kept my voice steady. He told the truth, I said. 4 words. She pressed her palm to her chest like it hurt. I forgot, she admitted. 2 words. I didn't scold. Remember now, I said. 2 words. We stood there in the damp night, the fundraiser noise fading behind the doors, the Trident banner still inside like a symbol that didn't get to define us anymore. My phone vibrated once, a message from James. Drive. Alone. I'll call. 4 words, then 2. I looked at my mother. Her hands were shaking again, but she didn't grab me this time. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't ask me to fix anything. She just nodded like she understood what love looked like when it finally stopped clinging. I walked to my car, the white chip sat in my pocket, warm against my thigh, and the award envelope felt lighter than it should have because paper wasn't the point. As I opened the driver's door, the cold metal handle stung my palm. I slid into the seat, closed the door, and for a moment I just listened to the rain ticking lightly on the roof. Then my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered anyway. Lila, James said, voice low and steady. Frank's not the only one lying. Rain tapped the roof of my car in soft, uneven beats, and the parking lot lights turned every drop on the windshield into a thin thread of silver. The inside of the car smelled faintly of old coffee and wet fabric. Real, unpretty, familiar. Lila, James said again, voice low through the speaker. Frank's not the only one lying. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel once, then loosened. I kept my eyes forward, even though there was nothing in front of me but darkness and a row of parked cars. About what? I asked. 2 words. Careful. James exhaled, steady. About you. 2 words, the simplest answer. I swallowed. The white chip warmed in my pocket against my thigh. I pressed it through the fabric like a pulse check. They keep saying you quit, he continued, that you took the easy door. 12 words. His voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I stared at the windshield where the rain blurred the world into soft distortions. I did leave, I said. 3 words. True. Heavy. You left the Navy, James replied. You didn't leave duty. 10 words. Silence sat between us, not awkward, sacred. In the distance, someone's car door thumped shut. A laugh floated, then died in the damp air. James spoke again, quieter. They lie because it's simpler. 8 words. My throat tightened, and for a second I hated how much that sentence explained. Simpler was Frank's religion. Simpler was the town's comfort. Simpler was my mother's survival. And you? I asked. 2 words. Because I needed to know where my brother stood when the noise faded. James didn't pause. I'm done being used. 5 words. The phrase landed like a clean cut. He wasn't saying he'd fight Frank in public. He was saying he wouldn't lend his name to a lie anymore. I didn't want you dragged into it, I said. 8 words. The old instinct. Protect him by shrinking. James's answer was immediate. You weren't dragging me. 4 words. Another breath, then, you were drowning. 3 words. His voice went rough for half a second, then steadied again. I looked down at my lap and finally let myself touch the chip directly, plastic smooth, edge worn. I rolled it once between my fingers. I hated being seen, I admitted. 4 words. I know, James said. 2 words. No judgment. Rain kept tapping. The heater clicked softly as it adjusted. My hands stayed steady, but my chest felt like it had been opened and left exposed to air. James continued practical again. Listen. One word. I'm not asking you to stay there, he said. Don't go home and beg. 12 words, straight to the point. I won't, I said. 2 words, and I meant it. A pause. Then his voice softened. Not sentimental, just human. I'm proud of you. 5 words. I didn't cry. Not yet. I stared at the rain on the windshield until my eyes burned and my throat worked once. Thanks, I said. 1 word, barely. James didn't let it become a moment he could perform. He moved on the way he always did. Anchor thrown, then back to the ocean. Your meetings, he said. Keep them clean. 5 words. I will, I replied. 2 words. And Mom, he added. 1 word, the real wound. She stood by the door tonight, I said. 7 words. James exhaled. That's her first step. 5 words. I nodded once, though he couldn't see it. I won't make her run. 6 words. Good, he said. 1 word, a faint, almost smile in his voice. Sleep. 1 word, then quieter. 1 day? 2 words. 1 day, I echoed. 2 words, and the call ended. I sat in the car for a full minute after the line went dead, listening to rain and my own breathing. No applause, no banner, no trident pin flashing in my eyes. Just quiet. Just choice. My phone buzzed again before I started the engine, a text from Frank. You poisoned this event. 4 words. Short. Cutting. I didn't reply. I deleted it the same way I deleted the old voicemail months ago, without ceremony, without rage, without feeding him a hook. I drove out of the parking lot slowly. The tires hissed on wet asphalt. The fundraiser hall shrank in my rearview mirror, its windows glowing warm like a lie people paid to sit inside. At the first red light, my hands loosened on the wheel. I felt the old urge to turn around, go back, apologize, make the room comfortable again. Then I remembered the crowd standing. Not for perfection, for truth. I drove forward. My mother's house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. The porch light wasn't on. That alone told me something. She wasn't performing peace for him tonight. The night air smelled clean and wet, and my shoes made soft sounds on the walkway. I knocked once, gentle. The door opened a crack. My mother's face appeared in the sliver, tired, red-eyed, awake. Lila, she whispered. 1 word, still mine. I didn't step in yet. I kept my voice low. Are you safe? 3 words. She nodded quickly, a hit. He's upstairs. 3 words. Quiet fear. I didn't ask if he was angry. Anger was his default setting. Do you want me to leave? 5 words. A boundary offered, not forced. My mother's hands trembled at the edge of the door. Then she did something I didn't expect. She opened it wider. No, she said. 1 word. Small courage. The house smelled like laundry detergent and something burnt. Toast left too long, maybe? Normal life fraying at the edges. We stood in the entryway where so many of our conversations had happened in whispers. The hallway light made her look older, but her eyes held steady on mine. I heard his speech, she said. 4 words. Her voice didn't accuse me, it accused the memory. I heard yours too, she added. 4 words. I touched my pocket, feeling the chip. James made that happen? 5 words. My mother swallowed. He always does. 3 words. Love and grief braided together. I kept my voice calm. He called. 2 words. Her eyes widened slightly. Is he okay? 3 words. He's James, I said. 2 words. The closest thing to comfort I could offer. My mother nodded, then looked down at her own hands like they belonged to someone she'd neglected. I let Frank tell the story, she whispered. 6 words. I didn't punish her with silence. I didn't rescue her with false comfort. I gave her something true enough to hold. You did what you could, I said. 5 words. She flinched. No, she said, sharper than she meant, then softer. I did what was easier. 9 words. I felt respect rise in me, not because she was perfect, but because she was finally honest. My mother's voice shook. I was scared of losing everything. 7 words. I nodded once, then fear makes bargains. 3 words. She looked up fast. What do I do now? 5 words. A real question. I kept it simple. Start small. 2 words. She blinked. How? 1 word. Tell the truth once, I said. To one person. 8 words. My mother's breath hitched. She nodded slowly like she could see the path, narrow but real. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked, weight shifting. A reminder that Frank still existed in this house like a parked threat. My mother stiffened. I didn't. I kept my tone steady. I'm not staying. 4 words. Her eyes widened, hurt, then understanding. Because of him? 3 words. Because of me, I said. 3 words. That landed differently. It wasn't rejection. It was boundary. It was the adult kind of love that didn't turn itself into a hostage. My mother's lower lip trembled. Will you come back? 4 words. The child question she'd carried too long. I answered without promising a fantasy. When it's peaceful. 3 words. She nodded, tears sliding but not collapsing her. Then she reached out and touched my sleeve, light, careful, like she was learning she could love me without fear's permission. I'm proud, she whispered. 2 words. It didn't feel like fireworks, it felt like a door opening quietly. I didn't make a speech. Thank you, Mom. 3 words. Then I stepped back into the wet night. Tuesday night arrived like it always did. No spotlight, no banners, no Trident logo. The church basement smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs waited in a circle, patient and unglamorous. I arrived early and set out the tissue box, the phone list, the naloxone trainer. My hands moved without shaking. The white chip sat in my pocket like a steady heartbeat. People filtered in, boots, sneakers, tired eyes. A Marine spouse with a tight jaw. A retired medic who never sat with his back to the door. A young man who couldn't meet anyone's gaze yet. Tessa came in last and gave me a small nod. No applause, no ceremony. Just presence. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't mention the gala. I didn't mention Frank. I didn't mention the standing crowd. I didn't drag this room into someone else's theater. I held up the white chip and kept my voice calm. One day, I said. 2 words. The circle answered softly, together. One day. 2 words. A young woman across from me, hands shaking, mascara smudged, whispered, I thought I was done. 5 words. I leaned forward slightly, meeting her eyes with controlled gentleness. You're here. 2 words. Her breath broke, then steadied, like she'd finally found a place where shame didn't get the microphone. And in that moment, I understood what pride actually was. Not a clean story, not a perfect uniform, not an award. Pride was showing up again after you'd been certain you didn't deserve to. I didn't need Frank to approve my past. I didn't need the town to sanitize me. I just needed to keep doing the work that kept people alive. Honor is truth you live, not applause you borrow.